Good morning. So I'm Rose. I'm going to talk to you today about how to gently say no to unwanted change proposals as an open source maintainer. But first, who am I? So I'm an open source engineer at VMware. Part of my role there for the past 2 years has been to maintain an open source project called Turn. As Kara mentioned, Turn is a tool, it's written in Python that will generate a software bill of materials for container images. It's a smaller project compared to some of the projects you'll hear about today. I work adjacent to only one other maintainer, but as maintainers, we work really hard to create an inclusive environment where our contributors feel valued and respected. And part of the way we do that is through our language, which includes the language we use to reject changes from contributors, which is all about what I'm going to discuss today. So all of us are maintainers in some capacity, and while the role of maintainer will vary slightly depending on your project size and purpose, generally speaking, our job as maintainers is to drive the project forward. So this might look like setting timelines for adding new features, or enabling your project to run on more platforms, or bug fixing, or just general maintenance to make the project better. Things you all do every day, I'm sure. In order to move the project forward as maintainers, we need to track ongoing work. So keeping track of who's fixing what bug, making sure it's fixed by the next release, keeping on schedule, essentially. Being a maintainer also means making decisions that align with your project's scope and direction. So I don't know about you, but Turn has definitely dealt with scope creep, where an idea for a feature comes up that's it's a good idea, but it's just slightly beyond what the project is designed to do. And our job as maintainers is to take a step back and say, you know, that's a great idea, but right now the project really needs to focus on something else. And then ultimately, our job as maintainers is to make good on project deliverables, right? So making sure users are able to actually use our projects. But most open source projects are made up of more than just maintainers, of course. All the work we do as maintainers is made possible with help from our community of contributors. And a contributor's role is to help with implementation of some of these bigger picture items we just discussed. So while a lot of the time you're going to get proposed changes that are great and they perfectly align with your project needs, you're really eager to merge them, you're also inevitably going to get proposals or issues filed or pull requests open that you don't agree with, right? And you might not agree with them and have to reject those changes for a number of reasons. Maybe you can even think of reasons you've had to say no, not listed here. But this is generally what I think of for reasons I've had to say no in the past. And one of the most important reasons you might need to say no to a change proposal is that the changes are just not in scope for your project, and merging them might potentially derail other deliverables. So maybe someone files a bug that you don't actually consider a bug, or files a bug that's not reproducible, or maybe you can reproduce the bug, but only under the most unique of circumstances, and 99% of the time, no user is going to hit it. So realistically, you just don't have cycles to fix it, and you have to reject it. You might get changes proposed to you where the way in which they're written are going to generate technical debt that you don't want to take on, or changes that maybe fix one problem, but in the process introduce another that the submitter may have overlooked. Another reason you might say no to a change proposal that's really common in open source especially is a situation where the change is too specific, or it's targeted for only one user or one use case, and merging it doesn't really benefit the community at all. And it just ends up creating more maintenance than benefit. And lastly, maybe you get a change proposal that's actually really wonderful and you genuinely believe it's a good idea, but for whatever reason, you just simply don't have the bandwidth or people power to implement it. And when these situations happen, it can feel awkward or difficult to know what to say, even though these are all perfectly valid reasons to reject a change. It's not fun to be the bearer of bad news, right? And maybe you're someone who's actually like, I don't have a problem saying no. I do it all the time. It comes really naturally to me. This talk is still for you, because like with everything, there's constructive and destructive ways to do something. So for example, if someone proposes something, you could just respond no, period. And that would technically be one way to say no, but arguably not the best way. When we're coming up with ways to say no, the goal is to communicate your point in a way that's clear and respectful, that doesn't estrange your contributors and instead makes them want to keep coming back, even if their proposal doesn't pan out, right? So how can we respond in a way where everybody wins? And some of the strategies I'm going to talk about might work for certain situations and may not be appropriate for others, but this one is universal and works in all situations. And it's really as simple as it looks. Start with thank you. So even if you get the silliest, the worst proposal you've ever seen, thank the contributor for their time, their idea, their interest in your project, however you want to phrase it, just start with thank you. Because here's the thing, people like to feel appreciated. They want to feel valued, and especially if you're going to deny their change, thank you is always going to soften the blow. Not to mention, a bad proposal can still lead to a good idea, right? I can think of multiple situations where someone proposes something that I know doesn't make sense to merge, but in the process of having that discussion of why the change doesn't make sense, they bring up another really good point or another use case I hadn't considered, and that leads to other innovation within the project. So this idea of saying thank you and expressing gratitude really just comes down to the fact that we're all human, we're all doing our best, we all like to feel appreciated for our efforts. So start with thank you. And then once you've thanked the contributor, it's time to get started writing your response. And if you're a people pleaser like me, or you just cringe at the idea of confrontation when you tell someone their idea isn't going to work, it's tempting to just ignore them or tell yourself like, I'll respond to that later, where later is actually just never, and you hope that by not responding and avoiding them, they kind of get the message from your non-response. But especially when you're saying no to something or requesting like significant changes before you can say yes, response time is key. The longer you wait to respond, one, the more awkward it gets to address, and two, the more frustrating it is for the contributor. So think of it from their point of view. They might have worked days or even weeks coming up with this change proposal. And you all have been contributors at some point. You know that feeling of excitement when you propose something that you think is good. You're eager to hear what people think about it. Or in the case of an issue report, like maybe you're really frustrated by it. And in either case, the longer it sits without any acknowledgement, the less excited and more frustrated you get. Waiting on a response also discourages participation on the user level. So think like if you're using a project and you file a bug and it doesn't get any attention, like you're probably thinking, what else are they ignoring? Like, what if this was a high importance security bug? What else are they ignoring? What is their security and maintenance posture like? But especially as a first-time contributor, waiting to respond discourages participation. So think back to your first contribution to a project and how much courage and effort it takes to dive in as a brand new community member. If you just get ignored, most people are not going to want to go through that process again for nothing. So all of this is to say, you don't need to feel guilty saying no. You are a subject matter expert when it comes to your project, and you're a maintainer for a reason. So trust those decision-making abilities, and as best you can, it's important to respond in a timely manner. This is not to say that you can never take a vacation or a break. I fully encourage you to hit pause, take time for yourself, protect your personal time. But when you're away, just make it clear what contributors can expect so you can keep that dialogue open. Another easy way to say no to unwanted change proposals is through your documentation. So Brandon kind of touched on this, but organized, detailed, relevant documentation sets clear expectations for contributing, and it lets your contributors know what they can expect from you. I will say having good documentation does not in any way mean contributors are actually going to read it. I'm sure many of you have been frustrated by this in the past when someone asks a question that's already documented in depth in the README, but it's still important to have that information there. So things like a project roadmap or design docs or specifications, just general guidelines for submitting and accepting contributions, commit message requirements, or any other general expectations you may have. Having those written down makes it easy when you get a proposal that doesn't align with your project scope, for example, to just say, thanks for reaching out, but this doesn't align with the scope of our project. Take a look at our project roadmap to see what we're focused on right now. And then documentation makes it really that simple. You don't have to go into some long explanation to justify yourself. If it's written down, you've already justified it, and that's just the way that it is. This doesn't mean that you're never going to get pushback or that you should never reconsider existing guidelines, but giving someone a link to an already written down explanation is easier than having to write out the explanation from memory every time. And then similarly, in your correspondence with folks, try to keep that public as well. So if you have a Slack channel for your project, try to keep any discussions about features or direction or bugs public, so you have that record that you can point to when you need it in the future. So another strategy I use to say no, and this is something that is not only useful as a maintainer in open source, but if you have kids, or a spouse, or any situation where you need to say no for whatever valid reason, but you don't want to completely shut down the conversation or the person. And that is to try to rephrase your no as an opportunity to say yes. So think of the conversation like a road. Instead of just putting up a roadblock and saying, turn around, bye, you can redirect them to keep moving. So maybe they're suggesting something that is genuinely a good idea for a feature, but you just don't have the bandwidth to take it on. Suggest that they do it. So rephrase it as an opportunity to participate. 90% of the time, they'll probably say no, but they may surprise you. And it also gives them an opportunity to be part of the solution. Or maybe you rephrase your no as an opportunity to connect with other subject matter experts or reviewers of the project. Maybe give the contributor an opportunity to connect with other stakeholders of the project or other users with similar use cases. Maybe they don't get their proposal merged, but they still get something that they need by connecting with others. Or maybe by connecting with others, they realize they don't even need their proposal merged to get what they want. As the maintainer, you know best about the stakeholders and the use cases, and so you're really primed to create those connections. Or give them an opportunity to learn about your project. So the next time they want to merge a feature or propose a change, they're a little more informed and a lot more likely to get their proposal right. So even if they decide not to propose a change again, at least they learned something, right? And learning is fun. So no matter which of these strategies you decide to deploy, remember that you're the maintainer for a reason. So consult other maintainers if you need to, and then trust your decision about what's best for the project, especially if you're feeling pressured, like you have to say yes, or someone's rushing you for an answer. Sometimes that answer is going to be no, and that's okay. So let go of any guilt that you might feel and just trust your decision. You can always decide to revisit a proposed change in the future. So if you're unsure about something and you don't want to just say no, maybe you propose, maybe that's kind of the way you say no. Something like, we don't have time to do that right now, but let's revisit this after the next release. Or let's wait until this feature is implemented to take a look at this again. Maybe it's not a no, it's just a not right now kind of thing. Just a small note on that suggestion, I would only offer to revisit the proposal in the future if you actually want to do that. Don't use this as just a way to kick the can down the road. And then most importantly, I want you to remember that when you need to say no, your job is to reject the proposal itself, not the person behind it, which means that you want to say no in a way that doesn't take aim at a person's character or intelligence, in a way that doesn't talk down to someone. And maybe try instead to say no in a way that empowers your contributors to try again. So you can do this by using that objective, fair set of guidelines that's documented somewhere, right? And that can be applied to everyone's proposal equally. So to summarize, when you're thinking about how to say no to an unwanted change proposal, and you start to craft your response, start with thank you. Don't delay, point them to relevant documentation, and when appropriate, maybe try to rephrase your no as an opportunity for yes. And above all else, when in doubt, when you don't know what to say, be kind. We are all just people trying our best. And that's all I have today. So thank you for your time. I hope to meet some of you in the game, hallway track. Thank you.
Hello, there I am.
Hello.
All right, well, sorry, I was talking to myself in the backstage, but I was just saying thank you very much for the content. the strategy as well. I can imagine working on a project like the one you're working on with only one other maintainer, having the balance and the process to be able to say, not not
Yeah.
now, please read guidelines. Yeah, it's relevant information, I think, for all maintainers of different walks of life and different levels and scales, for sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, Rose, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
everybody who's listening, thank you very much for coming to the Global Maintainer Summit. We were not done. We were literally just getting started. This is an opportunity for us to hear from maintainers, hear about their stories like Rose that just shared, and Brandon. We're currently in the contributor relations section, our topic. And this is all focused on people like me who like to contribute to projects and be a part of the scene in the game. And also, speaking of the game, y'all, Gather Town, if you go to maintainers or globalmaintainersummit.github.com, we have an interactive environment for you to chat with other maintainers, other contributors, learn stories. You can actually interact with them. It's kind of wild. Like, Rose, you mentioned you don't live in Portland anymore. But I know Portland's a pretty vibrant city. There's a lot of cool things to go to, coffee shops.
Yeah.
Gathertown has a coffee shop.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Bring your own coffee shop.
Yeah. And so did you attend a lot of different conferences and the before times before talking about your project?
Yes, the before times. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the future is now. So now we're trying to recreate that experience of you can have that hallway track experience, have this sort of unearthed conversations, learn from folks, and figure out like where are opportunities for you to participate, collaborate, learn from each other. I think that's the beauty of having a conference like this.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. That's where I'm going next. So.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing you in there. I'll be walking around. You'll have to find me. I'm like Batman. I hide in the shadows.
Okay.
Which is the other thing. If you are in the shadows, you don't have to participate in other conversations. It's kind of fascinating how technology works these days.
Yeah.
I act like I don't actually write code.